welcome back to Keto Homestead with Jess. Today we're going to talk about the differences between almond flour and coconut flour. So stay tuned to gain some great knowledge. Almond flour, carb-wise, almond flour has 6 grams of carbs. Coconut flour has 21 grams of carbs, and that's per serving. A serving of almond flour or coconut flour is a half of a cup. So most recipes call for a whole cup. So if you add it up, if you use almond flour, you're going to consume 12 grams of carbs, which would equal a whole cup. Most recipes call for a whole cup. So almond flour would be 12 grams of carbs, where coconut flour would be 42 grams of carbs per cup. So that's something to take in consideration when deciding whether or not to use almond flour or coconut flour. Now, almond flour and coconut flour are both keto friendly. It just depends on what your goals are. For example, my goals are and have been for years to stay under 20 grams of carbs. Now, if you're consuming the coconut flour, obviously you're going to be over 20 grams of carbs per day, depending on how much you eat. So that is just a tip. That is why I go with the almond flour. I want to stay under that 20 grams of carbs per day. I suggest picking the option that works best for you. Coconut flour has a high quality, richer fat to it. As far as almond flour goes, it has a higher fat content per serve, but both are still good. They're both keto friendly. Now, as far as taste, with the coconut flour, I can really taste that coconut flavor when I am baking or cooking with it, and I personally do not care for it. Now with the almond flour, I feel, for me, almond flour takes on whatever ingredients you add to it. So that's another thing to think about when deciding which one you would like to use. Now, the texture of coconut flour, I also don't care for. I think it's a lot harder to work with, and it personally isn't for me. The almond flour is a lot easier for me to work, to make good baking recipes with, but those are things that you'll have to try and see which one works best for you. And all cooking is trial and error, so you won't know until you try for yourself. Your taste buds may be different from mine. You might prefer the coconut flour over the almond flour, whereas some people will prefer the almond flour over the coconut flour. It just personally depends on you. That being said, you need to keep in mind coconut flour requires twice the amount of moisture that almond flour does, because it absorbs all your wet ingredients. So for example, if you're using the coconut flour, you're going to use 6 eggs per recipe with the coconut flour, but if you use the almond flour, you're going to use 2 eggs. So that's the difference. The coconut flour absorbs all your moisture, so you need to add more moisture. So cooking and baking with almond flour or coconut oil, you really need to understand how each one works, because each one is going to bake and cook differently. So understanding that is a very important tip. Also, taking into consideration whatever recipe you're making, what that texture is going to be, and what it's going to look like when you're pulling it out of the oven or off the stove. Another consideration with the coconut flour is you need to know that it has high amounts of fiber in it, meaning that it can cause bloating and gas. So if you do decide to use the coconut flour, I would suggest starting in small amounts and working your way up. Almond flour has loads of omega-6 in them, which is really good and really healthy for you. But you do need to keep an eye out on that, because we do have a lot of omega-6s in our foods, and too much of anything isn't good for you. So keep that also in consideration. Alright guys, I thank you for watching this video, and I hope it helped you understand the differences between almond flour and coconut flour, and I hope the information helps you. Please comment below. Let me know which one you prefer to cook with, almond flour or coconut flour. And I hope to see you soon.